Thank you to Andre and Vincent for the invitation in this session and for the opportunity to talk about climate change perception and adaptation strategies of smallholders in the highland Andes of Colombia. This work was financed by the Universidad Militar, Nueva, Granada. It has been stated that in mountainous areas like the Andes, the effects of climate change could be harsher because of the already high climate variability that we see in the Andes. This situation could hit harder smallholders in these areas, in addition to the difficult social and economical conditions that they already see in their daily lives. People in this area are associating climate change with more unpredictable, irregular, permanent, and events, and even an increase in extreme events. They also are perceiving increases of pests and diseases in even new species I have never seen before, and as well as changes in crops suitability. They have to go higher in the mountains to cultivate potato, which is a staple food. All of these perceptions are aligned with climate change models and scientific predictions. But they're not only being victims, they're also adapting despite all of these challenges. And they're adapting farmers in this region and worldwide to abrupt changes by drawing knowledge from their traditions, their local institutions, and technological advances within their reach. All smallholders are generally exercising two types of adaptations to climate change in relation to their farm activities. There are those that take place on the farm and are directly related to agricultural production. Those are the on-farm strategies. And the off-farm are those adaptations that are removed from the agricultural practice and are mostly of economic and social character. And I will talk about them further. So why study the people of the Altiplano Cundiboyacense in Colombia? Well, unlike other Andean Altiplanos that are mostly dry, the Altiplano Cundiboyacense has a great climate suitability and has witnessed intensive agricultural production uninterrupted, where the majority of the agricultural and horticultural products of the country takes place. It is a large region that you can see here in the shaded area, covered to almost 3 states. In this region, as I told you, they produced, especially smallholders, most of them are smallholders, produce 70% of Bogotá's food, and the metropolitan area has around 12 million persons, and 30% of Colombians' food basket. So despite the smallholders' outsized contribution to the country's economy and food security, among other contributions, 40% of rural population live in poverty. This is pre-pandemic figures. We expect that these figures has increased, and they have been historically marginalized. They have been also highly impacted by the country's armed conflict, lack of government support, and political recognition. So in this address, we wanted to address the perceptions of climate change and associated phenomena, and also to look at the adaptations strategies to climate change of a group of mestizo Andean smallholders from Colombia, and analyze how they are adapting by how their process are by application of local knowledge and social wealth. So we focus our research within this big area in 3 municipalities that are in the red square, and within that region we made a study case with 27 smallholders. And we perform a series of 2 semi-structured interviews, participant observations with each producer in their farms, and focus groups, and run a series of analyses to answer our research questions. All of the smallholders that we interviewed have heard of the climate change phenomena, and most of them felt affected by climate change related events. They define climate change with concepts to a growing uncertainty to predict seasonality and to the magnitude of climatic events. For example, how long will the rains going to last? If there will be a lot of water now or not. And they also define it as the increase in the occurrence and intensity of extreme climatic events, as expressed also by other Andean smallholders in Bolivia and in Peru. The smallholders in this Altiplano associated 11 events to effects of climate change. Among them, drought increases, night frost increase were the most damaging climatic events reported. Also, night frost is a very particular climatic event that takes place in the Andes, and it's very damaging for the economy of Andean countries. And they also perceive differences in the crop vulnerability. The majority of native crop species they were not reported with any vulnerability, as well as a third of the species that were introduced were reported with some crop vulnerability. But what is interesting that they registered the majority of the vulnerability was in the crops classified as vegetables, with 25% of the species, for example, more than fruit trees. And here is what it's like a conundrum, because they rely on high agrobiodiversity for one of the coping mechanisms to adapt to climate change. They cultivated 47 crop species and around 79 species, all varieties of those species. And most of them, as you may see in the picture, are vegetable crops. So they recognize the climate risk associated with these introduced vegetable cash crops, but the majority of the smallholders rank those crops as the most important, thereby potentially placing their food security and incomes at risk. They also did another on-farm strategies to adapt to climate change, and they used 13 on-farm activities in addition to agrobiodiversity. And those focus on the health of the soil and water conservation practices. Interesting, smallholders that applied or used a greater number of strategies felt less affected by climate change than those who applied less. We also found that land tenure could be a decisive factor in the number of the strategies smallholders implemented. Landowners tend to implement more and more permanent and costly strategies, such as irrigation systems, and than tenants. And it's most likely because their investment of their work and efforts are secure. All small-scale farmers often use off-farm work as an adaptation strategy by diversifying their incomes. In doing so, they diminish the economic impact of losing the crops. The vast majority of the interviewees hold at least one other job besides farming, and up to 4. But this strategy could be a double-edged adaptation, because it might result in the abandonment farms if climatic conditions could be more severe. And we already seen a depopulation of farms and aging farming population. There's also a relationship between the perception of smallholders and the municipality to which they belong. As you may see in the left, they group in terms of perception to climate, they group in terms of their municipality. But when they're going to take action into what they can do, how can I adapt, they group by the membership to one farmers organization. So these organizations were very powerful in terms that they benefit, the farmers would benefit from the exchange of knowledge and their organization. They exchange seeds, they experience new ways they experiment new ways to grow. They offer credits, they share technical assistance and improve access to land and markets. And with all of these, even though they are applying all of these arrangement of strategies to adapt, they manifest that they felt vulnerable and helpless, especially when facing certain events like night frost. So what are the future prospects for this work? Is encourage climate modelers or policymakers to take into consideration the smallholders' perceptions and adaptations to climate change. They have nuances of what's going on locally, and it's important to incorporate those. And some of the smallholders are adapting to climate change, but there is a big uncertainty of how long these strategies will continue to provide resilience to climate change. We need to keep pushing to understand where we can go. And we call for an increased research in relation to land tenure, how this will benefit people and crop diversity. Thank you.